Well, the COP28 climate summit has headed into overtime after the deadline set by host UAE passed without a deal. Delegates struggled to find common ground around the use of fossil fuels as talks ran through the night. Negotiators are working to thrash out details of a new draft text which requires the green light from close to 200 countries. The summit's Director General says the presidency wants to include, quote, an historic mention of fossil fuels in the next draft text for a deal. But it is important that countries agree on the right language.
It's important to be clear on something. The text we released was a starting point for discussions. Again, this is entirely normal for a consensus-based process. When we released it, we knew opinions were polarized, but what we didn't know was where each country's red lines were.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber had pushed for a draft deal by today, the official end of the summit. But the issue of fossil fuels has remained a sticking point. Many top oil and gas producers such as the US, Canada and the EU are pushing for a phase-out. Pacific Island countries already suffering from rising sea levels roundly criticized the last draft for omitting reference to a phase-out of fossil fuels. For more, CNA's Julie Yu joins us live from Dubai. Julie, host UAE promising to try again to strike a deal. What are the chances of that deal actually being struck that is acceptable to enough parties?
Yeah, that's definitely the question that everyone here is asking. We are still playing the waiting game. The word is a new draft should be dropping sometime today, as the one released yesterday drew criticism from multiple fronts, including the U.S., EU, and climate-vulnerable countries like many in Africa and the Pacific Islands. Now, the upside is that it states the need to reduce fossil fuel consumption and production by 2050, but the downside is that there is no mention of phasing out or phasing down of fossil fuels. It's basically a list of things that countries could do, but isn't required to. So it's like an optional homework assignment, if you will. And of course, the oil and gas aren't mentioned explicitly in the text at all. And remember, this is just a part of the text that has received most attention. Climate adaptation, for example, is the other major challenge, and there's still no clear roadmap at how it'll be financed. But the UAE presidency has come out to say that the text released yesterday was just a starting point and that it was intended to spark conversations. They say that the ball is now in the court of the nearly 200 nations to come to an agreement. Well, a broad coalition wants stronger language calling for the phase out of fossil fuels, but that's adamantly opposed by Saudi Arabia and other OPEC plus nations. As some of you may wonder, what's the big deal? Why does the phrasing matter? But the significance of seemingly minor language alterations in UN documents shouldn't be underestimated because they can substantially impact countries' obligations and climate actions. So a lot left to decide at this moment. We'll see if COP President Sultan Al Jaber will present a revised version today that could please everyone for potential adoption if negotiations proceed positively. Back to you, Wesu.
Thanks. That's CNA's Julie Yu speaking to us live from Dubai.